In the days following, Shilian was unsuccessful in separating Qirong from the body he'd taken, even after trying all sorts of methods, and Qirong was growing quite pleased of himself. Thank goodness for Guzi, who didn't mind feeding his dad, as Shilian really didn't feel like cramming things into Qirong's mouth day in and day out. On the day of the Mid-Autumn Festival, Shilian drew an array outside Puchi Shrine, locked the door from the outside, left Roya behind to keep Qirong bound, and reported to the heavenly capital. They say in verse, "White jade capital of the heavens, 12 towers, 5 cities. The immortal strokes my head, hair bound to receive longevity." The white jade capital was, of course, referring to the heavenly capital. In preparation for the Mid-Autumn Festival, the heavenly capital was wholly refreshed. Other than that, Shilian saw a marked increase in armed guards in the streets, corridors, and terraces. They had probably been assigned after Huacheng's intrusion. The outdoor banquet was arranged under the moon, and exquisite incense perfumed the propitious ambience. Auspicious clouds drifted in the skies, and blossoms flurried like snow. It was a splendid setting for entertainment and moon-watching. When moon-watching in the mortal realm, if one were to create a circle by touching one's thumb to their index finger, the moon could fit right in that frame. However, when moon-watching in the heavens, the moon hung but a close distance away, looking as though it could be caught in only a few steps. It glistened white, like a giant jade screen, truly an ethereal sight, impossible to behold in the mortal realm. Needless to say, Junwoo sat at the head of the banquet. However, there was a hidden, intricate stratagem to the rest of the seating, a method underlying the order and position. Taking a seat too close to the front was naturally a no-no, but no heavenly official wanted to be seated too far away either. Shilian didn't really care for such pedantic etiquette, but formal attire was another requirement at the Mid-Autumn Banquet, meaning one had to dress to match the appearance of one's divine statues in the mortal realm. Shilian had not a single divine statue, so he simply wore his white Taoist robes with his bamboo hat hanging on his back. While a little shabby, he really didn't have anything better. Dressing this way was rather conspicuous, so he felt it'd be better to sit somewhere more hidden away. Just as he found a random corner, he looked up and saw Fengshen walking his way. Both of them hesitated for a moment, before giving each other a slight nod as a greeting. Fengshen walked on for a few steps, but then doubled back. "What are you doing sitting there?" Shilian thought he had taken the wrong spot, and stood. "I thought I could sit anywhere." Fengshen was about to say something more, when far in the distance Shilian saw Shi Qingsheng waving at him from the front of the banquet. Shi Qingsheng was in her female form at the moment, and when Fengshen turned to look, it was like he had laid eyes on something that unearthed a past trauma. Aghast, he hurried away and left Shilian to his own devices. Shi Qingsheng shouted, "Your Highness, over here!" The Windmaster was prominently popular in the upper court, and thus naturally her seat was one of the best, located close to Junwoo. This wave and call made many heavenly officials look over. Junwoo had been sitting in silence with his hand supporting his cheek, but now he also noticed Shilian, and inclined his head toward him, and so Shilian had no choice but to go over. On the way he caught no glimpse of Lang Chinchou, as expected. Apparently, Lang Chinchou had long since declined his invitation to the Mid-Autumn Banquet in favor of searching for Qirong's whereabouts. Shi Qingxuan found Shilian a seat right next to her, a spot with excellent feng shui. Shilian didn't think it appropriate, but the Windmaster was warmly inviting and also already pushing him to sit down. "I'll take you to the kid later, after the banquet is over," she said. "He's a little ugly, sure, but very obedient." Hearing this, Shilian could only say his thanks. The one seated next to them was Ming Yi, who sullenly fiddled with a white jade cup. The hand playing with that small vessel was surprisingly paler than the cup itself. The color of Ming Yi's face looked healthy enough, so it seemed the injuries he'd received during his imprisonment in the Ghost City had healed. "Lord Earthmaster, I trust you've been well," Shilian greeted him. Looking like he didn't want to talk, Ming Yi dipped his head. Shi Qingxuan, however, was the exact opposite. She knew everyone and could say a few words to anyone sitting to the front, back, left, right, and even those seated a million miles away. Shilian was in awe of how she remembered every heavenly official's name, no matter their rank. Seated next to Shilian was a young man of 18 or 19. His nose was tall, his brows deep, and his raven hair slightly curly. Shilian didn't know him, and the young man didn't know Shilian, so they both felt a little lost as they stared at each other. The awkward staring contest ended after Shilian offered a random greeting. Looking around some more, it seemed that Fengshen and Muqing had both taken seats that were as far from each other as possible. 3 heavenly officials were seated directly across from Shilian, and they carried on what seemed to be a very friendly conversation. On the left was a civil official dressed in black. He was easy and poised in his bearing, and proper and bright in his brow. His fingers gently tapped a regular rhythm on the table as he spoke. His demeanor was calm, at ease, and inexplicably familiar. In the middle was an official with whom Xu Lian was well acquainted, Pei Ming. On the right was a young master robed in white, who languidly fluttered the fan in his hand. The front side of the fan bore the word shui, for water, and the back was painted with 3 wavy lines. His brows and eyes quite resembled Shi Qingxuan's, but his expression was one of scornful arrogance. On the surface, he appeared to be a gentleman, but his eyes were quite clearly filled with disdain for everyone present. Who else could it be but the water tyrant? Understanding dawned on Xu Lian. They were the 3 tumors. That black-clad civil official had to be Ling Wen in her most powerful masculine form, and in it she certainly looked impressively dignified. Those 3 doled out a colorful variety of praise, complimenting one another to the ends of the earth and heavens, to the point where Shi Qingxuan grumbled continuous complaints under her breath. Fake, so fake. Xu Lian found it rather amusing, however. Just then he noticed a small, beautiful pavilion with red stage curtains covering all 4 of its sides at the front of the banquet tables. What's that? Shi Qingxuan smiled. Oh, you don't know? It's a really popular game in the upper court. Come, just watch, it's starting now. As soon as he spoke, the rumble of thunder rolled from beyond the skies. Junwu glanced up, then poured a cup of wine and passed it down. As the thunder growled overhead, the seated heavenly officials laughed and hollered, passing around that cup of wine. Don't give it to me! Don't give it to me! Pass it to him! Xu Lian figured out the general rules by watching the others play. So it's drummed flower passing. Trying their best not to spill a single drop, the crowd traded the cup of wine that Junwu had sent off. The wine could be given to anyone, but could not be passed back to the same person. When the thunder stopped, whoever held the wine cup would be teased for fun. Except Xu Lian didn't know what kind of fun awaited the holder of the cup. To Xu Lian, this game wasn't a friendly one. Passing the wine cup to someone could result in them becoming the recipient of ridicule, so most would choose to give it to people with whom they were friendly. But he wasn't very close with most of the heavenly officials present, so how could he dare tease others so nonchalantly? At best, he could hand it to the windmaster, but what if the windmaster happened to be the one who handed the wine to him? Best if no one passes it to me, Xu Lian thought, but I might be thinking too highly of myself. The first round was over before he even finished the thought. As everyone had hoped, the wine stopped in Pei Ming's hand. It seemed Pei Ming was used to this, and he downed the cup in one gulp, amidst roaring cheers. The officials clapped and hollered, Raise it! Raise it! In the thick of those cheers, that resplendent pavilion slowly raised its 4 curtains. Upon the platform stood a tall general, his head held high, his stride wide, cutting an exceedingly impressive figure. He didn't seem to notice the heavenly officials below, nor the strange, beautiful scenery beyond the pavilion. He took a few steps, and started singing verses, sonorous and fervent. As it turned out, whoever ended up with the wine cup would be treated to a performance. The pavilion brought forth a random play that had been written about that particular heavenly official in the mortal realm, and showed it for all to see. Given humanity's deep and abiding love for fabricating wild stories, who knew what kind of outrageous play would be shown? Furthermore, one couldn't know when they'd be picked, so the game was just as thrilling as it was embarrassing. However, this was also where the fun lay. It had to be said that every one of General Pei's plays were exhilarating, simply because the female lead was different every time. Sometimes it was a celestial fairy, sometimes a Yao, sometimes an unmarried noble lady. Every female lead was more beautiful than the last, and every story more shameless. The heavenly officials watched with relish, eagerly waiting for the female lead to enter the scene. Sure enough, it didn't take long before a lady dressed in black stepped onto the stage, singing like a golden oriole. The 2 actors sang to each other, the lyrics brazenly flirtatious. The more the crowd watched, the more something didn't feel right, as they started murmuring amongst themselves. What's the name of this play? Who's the woman the general is seducing this time? Just then, General Pei on the stage called out, Noble Ji! Below the stage, both Pei Ming and Ling Wen spat their mouthfuls of wine. Who else could Noble Ji be? Ling Wen was Ling Wen's heavenly title. Her proper name was Nangong Ji. The heavenly officials were shocked. Had those 2 really been tangled up in an affair at some point? Ling Wen wiped the corner of his lips with a napkin, then said despondently, No need to think on it. It's a fabrication. While the two in question were both a bit put out, they were fortunately thick-skinned enough. The play's leads continued to yowl to each other on stage, and the two below pretended not to see. Shiwudu wouldn't let them off the hook so easily, however. He smiled as he fluttered his fan. What an exciting play! Any thoughts, you two? Not really, Lingwen replied. This play is old. My divine statues back then weren't like the ones I have now. It's only folklore. Think about it. In folklore, what woman hasn't Old Pei tried to seduce? Everyone agreed wholeheartedly. Pei Ming spoke up in his own defense. Hey, you can't say that. In folklore, it's true that I've seduced pretty much everyone. But in this particular case, I really haven't. Don't wrong the innocent. Well, folklore says I've seduced even more male officials, all told. You don't see me all fidgety, do you? Lingwen quipped. Lingwen had originally been brought up to the heavens via appointment, and folklore claimed she'd accomplished this by seducing another heavenly official. This was also why, at the beginning, the palace of Lingwen had been cold and quiet with very few worshippers. During any period of particularly intense objection to her, she was cussed and cursed to the ends of the earth, and some would even throw menstrual linens and bralettes into her donation boxes. If any male official were similarly whispered about, they'd simply be called charming, and could take full pleasure in it. Although the situations were similar, the treatment of male and female officials clearly differed, and the consequences were quite different indeed. As Shilian reflected on this, the next round began. Shiwudu had laughed earlier, but this new round ended on him. In unison, the two tumors next to him cupped their hands in a congratulatory gesture. Instant karma. Take it graciously. Shiwudu furrowed his brow for a brief instant, then drank the wine. Those curtains raised once more. Before the curtains had even reached the top, two long trills came from within. Wifey! Hubby! Flourishing with affection, the tender voices were filled with sweet, interweaving yearning. Shilian witnessed with his own eyes how goosebumps sprouted over half of Shiwudu and Shi Qingxuan's bodies. Shi Qingxuan jumped to her feet. Gah! Hurry and cut it off! Shiwudu immediately barked, Drop the curtains! Drop them right now! Even without seeing anything, one could easily guess that this play was derived from the folklore that depicted Lord Watermaster and Lady Windmaster as husband and wife. When people told stories, tales of love and hatred were always fan favorites. If either feeling was already present, good. If not, even better, because then one could make it all up. The myths that cleave to orthodox worship of the gods generally consisted of whatever they had actually personally accomplished. But sometimes, when they saw what the mortals came up with for them, the gods had to hand it to people. These were the real myths. The moment Shiwudu gave the word, the curtains dropped with a conclusive swish. The heavenly officials in the audience all wanted to laugh, but didn't dare to, and they suffered as they held in their mirth. On the other hand, Shilian simply smiled and said, Lord Windmaster, I didn't know you could call for the curtains to drop. Shi Qingxuan was still shaking from the trauma, as she replied, Yeah, it's no big deal. Just donate 100,000 merits. Shilian was sat speechless, and the third round began. This time, the thunder didn't rumble for very long, and the wine cup ended up with the young man sitting next to Shilian. Seeing this, the reaction from the crowd of heavenly officials was odd. It wasn't enthusiastic, but it wasn't indifferent. It was like they were very interested in seeing the play, but didn't want to be obvious about it. That young man didn't seem too interested in the game, but he still drank the wine. He put down the cup, and the curtains raised once more. Two stood upon that stage. One was a young general with curly hair, like a stone lion's mane, and although exceedingly exaggerated, he still looked heroically sprightly, so he was portraying this young heavenly official. The other one had pointy lips and sallow cheeks, and was the very image of a wretched clown as he jumped all over the stage. When the young man faced the other, the latter would act serious, if still clearly slimy and loathsome. When that young man turned around, the other would pull awful faces and backstab him with a sword. No doubt this was the role of a despicable, two-faced villain. That clown performed with embellished vigor, like it was a silly comedic play. However, the reactions from the heavenly officials in the audience differed vastly. Shilian noticed that the officials in the lower ranks laughed uproariously, while higher-ranking officials like Shi Qingxuan and Shiwudu frowned wordlessly, not thinking it the least bit amusing. At the same time, he also noticed veins popping on the fists of the young man beside him, and Shilian became alarmed. Although he didn't understand the specifics of what was going on stage, he easily grasped that it was mocking someone. Even if he didn't know who was who, the Li's performances were uncomfortable enough on their own. Seeing that the young man was on the verge of throwing a fit, Xilian took a chopstick from the stage and flung it at the rope, controlling the curtains. The not-so-sharp chopstick brushed the rope and surprisingly slashed it. The curtains dropped noisily, and the officials cried out in shock, "How can this be? What's going on?" They all looked to Xilian, some even rising to their feet as they did. Xilian was about to open his mouth when something exploded next to his ear. It seemed that the young man had shattered the white jade wine cup in his fist. The play had apparently provoked him, and he tossed away the shards of the jade cup in furious outrage. He sprang onto the table, pushed off with his feet, and barged into that pavilion through the curtains. A number of heavenly officials rushed over to lift the red curtains, but inside it was already empty. The crowd was in an uproar. Oh no, His Highness Qi Ying went down to beat people up again. Qi Ying? The palace of Qi Ying? The martial god of the West, Kong Yishen? Xilian hurriedly asked Shi Qingxuan, Lord Windmaster, what's going on? What's with His Highness Qi Ying going down to beat people up again? Shi Qingxuan snapped out of it and replied, beating people up is just beating people up. You might not believe it, but Qi Ying frequently beats up his own worshippers. Well, this was the first time Xilian had ever heard of a heavenly official who dared assault their own followers, since that was usually something that would destroy their image in a believer's mind. He wanted to inquire further, but he heard a lower-ranked heavenly official a short distance away speak up in displeasure. That Kong really is too immature. Everyone was just having fun. Doesn't he know to play along a little? Who hasn't been picked on? Were General Pei and Lingwen Zhenjun not teased? Besides, he wasn't even the one being mocked, so why is he so angry? Yeah, he really thinks too highly of himself. Even if he's mad, there's no need to have a fit right this second. This banquet is meant to be fun. No one's here to watch him throw tantrums, really. All right. A brat is a brat. He's not here anymore. It'll be more fun without him anyway. Xilian listened to them talk and mulled over their words. The feast was only temporarily disrupted, and Lingwen seemed to have already sent someone to take care of Kong Yizhen's present engagement. After some officials came out and pacified the crowd, the banquet and games resumed. Thus the thunder rumbled, and the fourth round of drummed flower passing began. Xilian just watched the others play the game at first. He couldn't blend in and was just happy that no one bothered him. Unexpectedly, just as he was about to chat with Shi Qingxuan, a hand suddenly extended and passed him that white jade wine cup. And that is chapter 41.